CAGNEY and Lacey was once praised as one of the most authentic and human crime dramas of the 1980s. But behind those gripping investigations, the real lives of the cast were marked by tragedies far darker than anything on screen. Sudden illnesses, career-ending accidents, and deaths that passed quietly, almost hidden from the world. Join us as we uncover who they truly were and honor the legacies they left behind. Tyne Daly as Mary Beth Lacey. Tyne Daly was born on February 21, 1946, in Madison, Wisconsin. At 35 years old, she played Mary Beth Lacey, a working-class NYPD detective juggling criminals, bills, and motherhood in CAGNEY and Lacey, 1981. Her character was the emotional backbone of the precinct, the steady counterweight to CAGNEY's fire, and the show's most grounded voice of humanity. Yet behind that strength was a private life far more fragile than audiences ever imagined. Her marriage to actor Georg Stanford Brown was far more painful than the public ever realized. As an interracial couple in the 1960s and 70s, they were attacked by prejudice, questioned by colleagues, and pressured by families who feared backlash. Tyne often found herself torn between defending her marriage in public and holding together a household shaken by constant stress. That pressure followed her onto the set. She fell into a depressive spiral, terrified she could no longer support her 3 daughters when the show's abrupt canceled in 1982. The anxiety bled into her later work, even as she fought to rebuild herself in projects like Gypsy and Judging Amy. The emotional fractures left by the marriage deepened over time. Arguments, career jealousy, and the exhaustion of raising 3 children in Hollywood's chaos pushed the couple to a slow, painful separation. By 1990, the split had drained her physically, causing episodes of burnout, insomnia, and stress-related illness. Today, Tyne Daly is 79 years old and still working selectively despite recent health struggles that forced her to withdraw from a Broadway revival. Her estimated net worth of $4 million reflects a lifetime of her resilience. Al Waxman as Bert Samuels. Al Waxman was born on March 2, 1935, in Toronto, Canada. At 46 years old, he played Lieutenant Bert Samuels, a tough, sharp-tongued supervisor who hid a strangely paternal heart. In CAGNEY and Lacey, 1981, his character pushed the detectives hard, but also protected them fiercely, creating one of the show's most compelling dynamics. Off-screen, however, his own life was far from the authority and stability he portrayed. His marriage to Sarah Waxman was loving, yet burdened by the emotional damage he carried from years of career rejection. Hollywood's dismissal of his Canadian sound shattered his confidence, leaving him moody and withdrawn. Sarah endured long absences, financial tension, and nights spent calming a husband who felt the industry was closing its doors on him. That emotional turmoil followed him to work, clouding performances and pushing him into an obsessive drive to prove himself in later projects like King of Kensington and Net Worth. The weight of disappointment and overwork left his body deteriorating long before his fame peaked. Heart complications worsened as stress piled on, the family arguments, and the guilt carving into his health until surgery became his final. Al Waxman died on January 18, 2001, at age 65 during heart bypass surgery in Toronto. He was laid to rest at Pardes Shalom Cemetery. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was $3 million. Sharon Gless as Christine CAGNEY. Sharon Gless was born on May 31, 1943, in Los Angeles, California. At 39 years old, she played Christine CAGNEY, a sharp-tongued, emotionally guarded NYPD detective in CAGNEY and Lacey, 1982. Her character embodied independence, ambition, and vulnerability, becoming the heart of the show. But while Christine CAGNEY fought criminals, Sharon Gless was fighting a far more personal war. Before marrying producer Barney Rosenzweig in 1991, Gless survived a series of painful relationships that left deep emotional scars. One of the most damaging involved a fellow actor she dated during the filming of Switch, 1975 to 1978. A relationship so volatile that tabloids published stories implying infidelity and on-set tension, pushing her into anxiety and binge drinking to escape humiliation. Her parents' harsh disapproval of her career only worsened things. Her own grandfather once told her acting was a filthy business, cutting into her confidence at a moment she desperately needed support. When Switch failed in ratings and was canceled, Gless spiraled into heavy alcohol use, isolating herself for months and nearly quitting acting entirely. By the time CAGNEY and Lacey became a hit, the emotional toll of portraying a fearless woman began crushing her. Critics praised Christine CAGNEY for her toughness, unaware that Sharon was suffering panic attacks before shoots. The pressure led to insomnia, trembling before early morning calls, and eventually a breaking point when she admitted herself into treatment for alcoholism. Only Barney Rosenzweig, who loved her before she loved herself, helped her stabilize. Their marriage became the first steady foundation she had known in decades, even as the lingering insecurity haunted her performances in The Trials of Rosie O'Neill and Queer as Folk. Now, Sharon Gless is 82 years old, still mentally sharp though slowed by minor health issues, and continues to write, speak publicly, and maintain a selective acting schedule. Her estimated net worth of $5 million reflects decades of rebuilding her life after addiction and heartbreak. Martin Kove as Victor Isbecki. Martin Kove was born on March 6, 1947 in Brooklyn, New York. At 36 years old, he played Detective Victor Isbecki, the brash, defensive NYPD officer whose ego often masked deep insecurity, in CAGNEY and Lacey, 1982. His character brought tension, humor, and masculine friction to the show. Yet offset, Kove was enduring a reality far harsher than anything written into the script. His marriage to Vivian Kove, which began in 1981, suffered almost immediately under the weight of his career struggles. Years earlier, during intense karate training, Martin tore multiple tendons in his right arm, an injury so severe doctors warned he could lose long-term mobility. The near paralysis sent him into depression, forcing him to turn down roles he had already auditioned for and pushing Vivian into the role of caretaker when the family needed income. When The Karate Kid, 1984, finally made him famous, success arrived too late to save the marriage. Filming the sweep-the-leg scenes required long days away from home, and Kove later admitted he missed birthdays, school events, and basic childhood moments with his twins Jesse and Rachel, born in 1990. Vivian accused him of loving his roles more than his family. He responded by doubling down on work, widening the emotional distance until their divorce in 2005 became inevitable. Now, Martin Kove is 79 years old, still training in karate and returning regularly to his role as John Kreese in Cobra Kai. He remains close to his son Jesse, who now acts alongside him, and continues to rebuild the relationships he once neglected. His estimated net worth of $4 million reflects a long, physically demanding career. John Karlen as Harvey Lacey. John Karlen was born on May 28, 1933, in Brooklyn, New York. At 49 years old, he played Harvey Lacey, the loyal, soft-spoken, deeply supportive husband of Mary Beth Lacey, in CAGNEY and Lacey, 1982. His character grounded the show with warmth, morality, and a quiet strength that contrasted the chaos of police work. Yet behind that gentle television husband was a man carrying darker wounds. Long before fame, Karlen's world nearly collapsed when Dark Shadows ended abruptly in 1971. Overnight, the actor who played Willie Loomis was unemployed, drowning in bills, and slipping into a depression he later admitted had pushed him to the edge of suicide. His wife, Betty Karlen, whom he married in 1963, tried desperately to keep the family together while he worked odd jobs, carpentry, set painting, even night shifts at a warehouse, to survive. The pressure hardened him. He drank heavily, often disappearing during the night to escape the feeling that his career had doomed their marriage. By the time CAGNEY and Lacey resurrected his career, the marriage was already corroded by years of distance. Betty grew exhausted from raising their son alone, while Karlen filmed long hours, traveling between sets and drowning loneliness in alcohol after rap. Their 35-year marriage finally ended in 1998, leaving Karlen devastated and drinking more heavily than before. The collapse of his family, combined with the psychological weight of being typecast as the broken man, fueled a second wave of depression. His physical health began to deteriorate. Chronic congestive heart failure left him weak, breathless, and increasingly isolated, though he continued to reprise Harvey Lacey for TV movies. Finally, John Karlen died on January 22, 2020, at 4:30 p.m. in Burbank, California, from congestive heart failure at the age of 86. He left behind one son, and an estimated net worth of $1 million came from a lifetime of stage work. Carl Lumbly as Mark Petrie. Carl Lumbly was born on August 14, 1951, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. At 30 years old, he played Detective Mark Petrie, a thoughtful, principled officer who often mediated conflict between Victor Isbecki and the rest of the squad, in CAGNEY Lacey, 1981. His character brought calm intelligence to the precinct, but off-screen, Lumbly's own life was spiraling into years of loss. Born to Jamaican immigrants, Lumbly grew up fighting to prove himself in industries that rarely welcomed black actors. After CAGNEY Lacey, racism in casting, slow career traction, and repeated fallback roles left him questioning his worth. His first marriage, to actress Vonetta McGee, whom he wed in 1987, was filled with love but overshadowed by her chronic heart problems. While filming long hours or traveling for press on shows like Alias, Lumbly often left her alone at home with their young son, Brandon. When Vonetta died suddenly of cardiac arrest in 2010, Lumbly blamed himself for not being there. In 2015, he married author Deborah Santana, hoping to rebuild his life. But the cultural differences neither could bridge led to explosive arguments. Deborah wanted stability and community, while Carl chased silence and distraction. Their marriage unraveled by 2019, leaving him feeling like he had failed two families in one lifetime. He later admitted that depression after the divorce echoed the identity crisis he felt early in his career, the fear that he was not enough. Now, Carl Lumbly is 74 years old, still healthy and working steadily in film and voice acting, even returning to the Marvel Universe as Isaiah Bradley. He remains close to his son Brandon and has redirected his life toward mentorship and advocacy. His estimated net worth of $2 million reflects decades of steady television work, animated voice roles. Harvey Atkin as Ronald Coleman. Harvey Atkin was born on December 18, 1942 in Toronto, Canada. At 39 years old, he played Sergeant Ronald Coleman, the steady, good-natured officer who brought humor and warmth to the precinct. In CAGNEY Lacey, 1981, his character served as the bridge between tension and levity, grounding the show with an unshakable, quiet humanity. But behind the laughs he delivered to millions, Atkin was fighting private battles. His move from Canada to Hollywood crushed him emotionally and financially. After starring in Meatballs, 1979, he was expected to rise, but his first attempts at leading roles failed spectacularly, leaving him drowning in debt, humiliated, and secretly drinking to cope. His wife, Celia Tesler, whom he married in 1963, watched his confidence unravel as he took on endless commercial voice jobs just to keep their home afloat. When doctors diagnosed him with early-stage cancer, he hid it from Celia and their children, Lisa and Danny, terrified that admitting weakness would collapse the family. Instead of slowing down, he worked even harder. These private pressures shadowed every performance. Even as his voice as King Koopa became iconic and he appeared in 95 episodes of CAGNEY and Lacey, the fear of financial ruin kept him pushing himself far past exhaustion. His children endured the heartbreak of seeing their once funny father retreat into pain and tremors caused by the tumor already growing in his brain. By the time doctors confirmed late-stage cancer, the family had been emotionally drained for years. Sadly, Harvey Atkin died on July 17, 2017, in Toronto, from a brain tumor at the age of 74. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was $1.5 million, earned through comedy, character acting, and thousands of voiceover sessions. Meg Foster as Chris CAGNEY. Meg Foster was born on May 10, 1948, in Reading, Pennsylvania. At 34 years old, she played Detective Chris CAGNEY, a sharp, emotionally guarded cop whose intensity matched her piercing blue eyes. In the early episodes of CAGNEY and Lacey, 1982, her take on the role was bold and raw, but studio pressure for a more traditionally feminine lead pushed her out, setting off one of the most painful chapters of her life. And that heartbreak was only one part of a much deeper personal struggle. From the beginning, Foster fought against her own appearance. Casting directors repeatedly told her she looked too strong, too severe, or too intimidating. When CBS abruptly replaced her with Sharon Gless after only 6 episodes, the humiliation destroyed her emotionally. She later stayed inside for days, convinced her career was over. Her short-lived marriage to actor Stephen McHattie unraveled under the strain. He wanted stability, while she carried the shame of being fired from a role built to launch her future. Their separation left her raising her son, Christopher Starr, from her relationship with actor Ron Starr due to her long shooting hours and constant emotional exhaustion. The emotional toll bled into her work. While she earned acclaim for They Live, 1988, she confessed the success came during a period dominated by panic attacks, insomnia, and depression. She isolated herself from friends, convinced she wasn't soft enough for Hollywood or present enough for Christopher. The anxiety, coupled with the strain of single motherhood, left her feeling both professionally sidelined and personally adrift. Today, Meg Foster is 77 years old and still acting, often admired as a cult icon of horror and science fiction cinema. She continues to raise her son, now an adult, and speaks often about how motherhood saved her from disappearing entirely into depression. Her estimated net worth of $1 million comes from decades of steady genre work. Robert Hegyes as Manny Esposito. Robert Hegyes was born on May 7, 1951, in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. At 35 years old, he played Manny Esposito, a fast-talking, street-smart undercover detective who brought volatile humor and chaos to the precinct in CAGNEY and Lacey, 1986. His character was loud, unpredictable, and unforgettable, but the man behind the performance was slowly being crushed by the weight of fame lost too quickly. After Welcome Back, Kotter ended in 1979, Hegyes expected doors to open. Instead, Hollywood turned on him. Casting directors told him he looked too ethnic. He spiraled into cocaine use during the early 80s, trying to numb the humiliation of losing roles that once seemed guaranteed. 3 marriages collapsed under the strain: Mary Eileen Kuhns, Kyle Drummer, and finally Lynn O'Hare, the mother of his 2 children, Cassandra and Mac. Each divorce left him more isolated. By the time he guested on CAGNEY and Lacey, he was already drowning in debt, living in temporary motels, and at one point sleeping in his car in Los Angeles. The consequences hit his health first. Years of drug use, stress from financial collapse, and the loneliness of failed relationships tore his body apart. He developed chronic chest pains in the mid-1990s, but refused treatment, believing he had to keep working to provide for the children he rarely saw. His attempt at a comeback, teaching acting and screenwriting at Rowan University while taking small TV roles, couldn't erase the emotional damage. The strain only worsened his heart disease, already accelerated by years of substance abuse. Sadly, Robert Hegyes died on January 26, 2012, at the age of 60, after suffering a massive heart attack at home in Metuchen, New Jersey. He left behind 4 children, 2 biological and 2 he helped raise through long-term partner Cynthia Wiley, and a modest net worth of $1.5 million, largely sustained by Welcome Back, Cotter royalties Paul Mantee as Al Carassa. Paul Mantee was born on January 9, 1931, in San Francisco, California. At 52 years old, he played Lieutenant Al Carassa, a disciplined, quietly authoritative officer who kept the precinct grounded, in CAGNEY LACEY, 1981. His character represented strength and order, yet outside the studio lights, Mantee's life was marked by pain. Before acting, Mantee served 4 grueling years in the U.S. Navy during the Korean War. A blast injury left him with lifelong nerve pain in his legs, pain he hid behind a stoic expression on screen. The trauma followed him into civilian life, nightmares, depression, and a sense of displacement that no Hollywood success ever fully erased. His early marriage to Diane E. Worth fell apart in 1961 under the weight of his untreated anxiety and unpredictable moods. Even as Robinson Crusoe on Mars made him a cult icon, he struggled with the insecurity of constant guest roles and the fear he would never again land a leading part. By the time he joined CAGNEY LACEY, the chronic pain from his military injuries had worsened. During long shooting days, he often retreated to his trailer just to breathe through the spasms in his legs. His personal life, however, finally steadied in his later years when he met Susie Davis, the woman he would remain with until his death. She brought gentleness into the chaos, helping him manage both depression. But it soon came back to him. Painkillers became routine, doctor's visits constant, and he often admitted he feared being forgotten by Hollywood entirely. Tragically, Paul Mantee died on November 7, 2013, at the age of 82 from complications related to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, passing away quietly in a rehabilitation center in Canoga Park, California. Susie Davis was by his side, holding his hand as he slipped away. His estimated net worth of roughly $200,000 reflected a lifetime spent in modest but consistent work. Barbara Babcock as Harriet DeLong. Barbara Babcock was born on February 27, 1937, in Fort Riley, Kansas. At around 45 years old, she appeared in the later seasons of CAGNEY LACEY as Harriet DeLong, a soft-spoken but resilient woman whose calm exterior concealed deep emotional complexity. Her role brought nuance and quiet strength to the show, marking one of the most grounded performances of her career. Yet in real life, Barbara's journey was far more fragile than the graceful poise she displayed on screen. Her marriage to actor Jay Sheffield collapsed by 1968, broken by their opposing personalities. She needed emotional safety after a lifetime of pressure, while he prioritized independence and career over intimacy. Their home turned cold, arguments constant, and with no children to bind them, the marriage disintegrated quickly. The breakup left her shaken and ashamed, and she spent months alone. Career setbacks deepened the wounds. Before her Emmy-winning turn on Hill Street Blues, she endured years of theatrical failures so painful she nearly quit acting altogether. She confessed to friends that the humiliation of being overlooked for roles made her feel invisible. That stress worsened when her body began betraying her. In the early 2000s, she noticed uncontrollable trembling in her hands while working on Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. Doctors diagnosed her with Parkinson's in 2004, a revelation that crushed her. The disease attacked her confidence. As the tremors worsened, she withdrew from Hollywood almost entirely. Today, Barbara Babcock is 88 years old and living quietly in Carmel, California, where she receives care for advanced Parkinson's disease. Her estimated net worth of $5 million comes from a lifetime of steady, respected roles. Allyn Ann McLerie as Dory Brennan. Allyn Ann McLerie was born on December 1st, 1926, in Grande-Mère, Quebec, Canada. At around 56 years old, she appeared in recurring episodes of CAGNEY LACEY as Dory Brennan, an elegant, sharp, emotionally layered woman whose presence subtly reshaped the show's tone. Her character was warm and witty, but her real life was marked by heartbreak that endured long after the cameras stopped rolling. Before Hollywood embraced her as an actress, McLerie was a rising Broadway dancer until a devastating leg injury shattered her dreams. The injury forced her off the stage she loved, triggering a crippling depression she battled for years. Her early marriage to lyricist Adolph Green ended in 1953, worn down by creative differences and her unpredictable emotional state as she struggled to accept the loss of her dancing career. But her second marriage to actor George Gaynes, beginning in 1953, became her anchor. Even so, tragedy struck where it hurt most. Their son, Matthew Gaynes, died in 1989 at only 27. Later, Allyn never walked the same way again. She withdrew from colleagues and cried backstage between takes. Despite the heartbreak, she kept working. Roles in The Tony Randall Show, WKRP in Cincinnati, and Molly Dodd. But privately, time and grief were chipping away at her. When Alzheimer's symptoms appeared, George Gaynes became her full-time caretaker. By the time she entered the final stages of the disease, she no longer recognized colleagues or longtime friends, and her family described the years as a slow, cruel erasing. Finally, Allyn Ann McLerie died on May 21, 2018, at the age of 91, from complications of Alzheimer's disease, passing away at her home in North Bend, Washington. She was laid to rest near her husband, George Gaynes, who had died 2 years earlier. At the time of her death, her estimated net worth was around $1 million, earned over a lifetime of musicals, television work, and unforgettable performances. Troy W. Slaten as Michael Lacey. Troy W. Slaten was born on February 21, 1975, in Los Angeles, California. At 7 years old, he played Michael Lacey, the curious, soft-spoken son of Mary Beth and Harvey Lacey, in CAGNEY LACEY, 1982. His character added innocence and family warmth to the gritty police drama, grounding the show's emotional core through a child's eyes. But behind the sweetness of his role, Troy was already carrying pressures that no 7-year-old was built to withstand. As a child star, Troy grew up juggling tutors, auditions, and the constant fear of disappointing adults who depended on his next booking to pay bills. The pressure worsened after Parker Lewis Can't Lose ended in 1993, when he was barely 18. Casting directors told him he was too old to be cute, too young to be leading. The rejections cut deeply, triggering depression and a fear of spiraling the way so many former child actors had. He retreated from friends, avoided auditions. The emotional toll pushed him to a crossroads. Determined not to repeat the tragedies he'd seen in Hollywood, Troy walked away from acting entirely and poured himself into education. The transition was brutal. Classmates at UCLA mocked him for being that kid from TV, and the isolation left him battling anxiety he rarely spoke about publicly. Still, he pushed forward, graduating with honors before earning his law degree from Pepperdine. Even as a lawyer, shadows of his childhood lingered. These years hardened him, but they also saved him, giving him a new identity, not tied to ratings or childhood fame. Now, Troy W. Slaten is 50 years old and thriving as a respected attorney and legal analyst in Los Angeles. He appears regularly on national news programs, teaches legal strategy, and continues to build his reputation far from his Hollywood beginnings. His estimated net worth of $2 million reflects both his early acting career and his successful shift into corporate and litigation law. Now it's your turn. Which cast member's story surprised you the most? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next Hollywood story.